Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. Your faction, red or blue, Horde or Alliance? It's one of those big three choices you make the very first time you ever loaded up the game. Race, class, faction. You've picked a side before you even know what that will represent in terms of game population, balance or gameplay themes. And for something that's so integral, so ingrained to World of Warcraft as a franchise, factions suck. I feel like we're in the late stage of seeing how faction-based conflict evolves in a game over a long period of time here, and it has indeed taken a very long time to reach where we are now at the moment. There has been an ever-growing conversation on retail about how heavily factions are skewed towards favouring the Horde for high-end content. And over on Classic, whilst the divide of Paladin and Shaman actually did a lot to give certain benefits between factions, that's a division that goes away with the expansion. Horde would have already had an advantage in Classic if they had Paladins, so not only do they get that, but some of their racials actually get buffed, like Blood Fury for Orc casters. We are in the process of recreating what has happened on retail in Classic at an incredibly rapid pace, going through over a decade of balance in the space of a couple years. Now, whilst we don't have paid faction transfers yet, that wasn't a feature until later on in Wrath of the Lich King originally. We do have the 58 boost in the game now, so swapping to your friend or group's faction, re-rolling to a new server, joining a new guild, all not too much to worry about if I'm honest. Here's a little excerpt from a Forbes interview with Ian on November 2020, just before Shadowlands release, when he was asked, any chance we might someday be able to group with our Horde or Alliance friends, the way our faction leaders have done? He answered, the challenge is, at this point, primarily a social one. There isn't a mechanical advantage to being one faction or the other, but the division between Horde and Alliance has been such an integral part of World of Warcraft. We are grappling with reconciling that we have a natural desire to play with your friends or have more ready access to groups. But we've nothing to announce at this point. Now, you probably heard those two phrases, it's a social problem and there isn't a mechanical advantage, and said, what, Ian? Are you okay there? Is everything all right? But you know what, at this point, it has grown to be more of a social issue, I think, but it 100% started as a mechanical one. It's just been unaddressed and unbalanced for such a long period of time. It's gone past that now. With TBC coming out, one of the things that blows my mind, just how insanely overpowered it is Will of the Forsaken. Don't know how on earth this ever made it past QA back in the day. Blizzard plays Horde meme is real after all, right? It breaks all charm, fear and sleep effects, makes you immune for 5 seconds, 2-minute cooldown, does not share a cooldown with the PvP trinket. A free pass for one specific race to completely negate the main CC from warriors, locks and priests. By the end of TBC, Horde were looking very dominant in PvP, and in Wrath of the Lich King, Blizzard thought, can we help the Alliance out a bit more and incentivize people to play that faction? Well, let's give them something even more broken, introducing every man for himself, a racial PvP trinket, so humans always had the numbers advantage by being able to equip 2 throughput trinkets. And they still have perception on top of that, which has always been very good. What happened? There was a big shift from top PvPers moving over from Horde back to Alliance to play human. And then they also made Will of the Forsaken share a cooldown with a PvP trinket in 3.3. This should be in TBC, by the way. Anyway, the point is, factions present choice, and choice means that something will be better. Of course, the mechanical imbalance begins at the top. The guys pushing rank 1 in arenas will play whatever is most optimal. Fastest Mythic Plus clears requiring Night Elves for those Shadow Meld resets. World First Raiders will throw money at whatever gives them a advantage. Remember certain classes like Priests and Shamans during the Tomb of Sargeras Kil'jaeden progression on Mythic, changing to Goblins so they could benefit from the Rocket Boots racial to deal with a knockback? Or the amount of dwarves you saw in the PTR testing of Castle Nathria because how many bleeds they could negate with stone form. And overall, at least we hear, the faction imbalance isn't too bad. After all, if you log in, do some dailies, pet battles, queue a few battlegrounds, faction balance just doesn't matter, to be honest. And there are different dynamics between Classic and Retail too. Whilst Retail has sharding and consequently massively larger servers, it allows for a lot of cross-realm play and makes the pool of available players much bigger. As long as you aren't trying to maintain a mythic roster, because Hall of Fame is a measure to open the player pool. That's quite literally never really worked beyond giving people who get a top 100 kill a title. Also, PvP is now opt-in thanks to War Mode since BFA. In Classic, we have locked servers, no cross-realm, and the old-style PvP and PvE servers. What do you know? There are actually more Alliance than Horde overall. Actually, let's filter this down a bit, shall we? Did you expect to see that? There's a skew to Horde favor too for PvP servers, but it's nothing compared to the amount of Alliance players on PvE servers. How have we got to this point then? Horde have a massively better pool for Mythic Plus players and top-end raiders in retail, and in Classic, literally every single PvE server bar one is Alliance dominated. The common factor between the two games is factions. Again, it's one of the big three choices you make when you first play the game. This is how much impact it really has behind the scenes, and at this point it's completely impossible to fix with how far it's gone, and I mean impossible. You could give gnomes a racial that says do 10% more damage for 20 seconds, and it would take years for the pendulum to swing back around to Alliance favor, in retail at least. It's not just balance making things the way they are, it's the player availability, it's the barriers the game puts up, it's having your friends, families or guildies on that faction, it's your characters that you've built up on that faction, it's the cost of changing or the time investment in doing so, it's character attachment, and for some it's faction pride. Here's some more words from Ian from another Forbes interview from April 2019 before the rise of Ashara patch in BFA. When asked about faction balance, he says, "It's a problem we acknowledge and something that we consider to be a problem that we need to work on. We don't have any solution to announce right now, but it's something we actively discuss. The challenge is also we're not looking to encourage mass amounts of faction migration. It's more how can we build a healthier high-end Mythic Plus scene or a healthier high-end raid scene on the Alliance side among the Alliance population. But there is ample critical mass to support healthy communities on the Alliance side. It's more a matter of encouraging the formation and encouraging more people to dip their toes into those types of activities, so there are more people to play with. So on one hand, we don't want to cause swinging faction migrations. On the other hand, you want more people on the Alliance side who don't do high-end Mythic Plus or raiding to start doing it, since the overall population isn't too bad. Well, it's already a tough scene to get into as a new player, and I think most people recognize fairly early on their life would be infinitely easier if they played with the Reds rather than the Blues. Path of least resistance, right? So what do? Is it time we got rid of factions completely? Mercenary mode exists in PvP. We played as the opposite faction in Battle for Dazara Lore briefly. We've tried faction-based conflict expansions twice, Mr. Pandaria and BFA, and funnily enough, Mop did it better than BFA. How does nearly every single major patch degenerate into us versus the next big threat kind of guy? Pick an expansion and I'll give you an us versus them raid. AQ40, Sunwell, ICC, Dragon Soul, Siege of Orgrimmar, whole of Warlords of Draenor, all of Legion, Ashara's Eternal Palace, Castle Nathria, and whatever we get in 9.1 by the sounds of it. But it's World of Warcraft, right? Not World of Peacecraft. I've read this, oh boy, a lot. I mean, for a game called Warcraft, it released with literally zero PvP content in 2004, other than I can attack a red bar, whilst it had 2 full raids, those being Molten Core and Onyxia's Lair, and over 20 dungeons. The honor and ranking system wasn't until 5 months after launch, and Warsong Gulch and AV were 6 months after launch. I'm just saying, if you wanted a PvP focused game, you would, you know, make some PvP content maybe. And when it comes to PvP interaction in the game, this goes mainly for Classic, factions are, well, they're very limiting. If someone on their create character screen picked the same faction as you, then you are automatically on the same side. Interaction isn't made on a player-by-player basis, the game does half of it for you. You might really dislike a guild or a player on the same faction as you, but hey, they're technically your friends because you both picked red or blue. Whilst on the other hand, literally everybody on the opposite faction is auto-flagged as an enemy, and on PvP servers they will be attackable with very little in the way of restrictions, again, limiting interactions with them greatly. Imagine World of Warcraft where we all start as neutral pandas that never picked a side. Everybody is flagged yellow or neutral, a game where you decide who is friend or foe. I don't see it happening for WoW, but I've played games sort of like that, such as RuneScape, but that does have a very limited PvP zone. And I've been keeping my eye on Ashes of Creation in the future, which will be open-ended. Is true freedom of interaction and player-driven content the dream, or a playground for rampant griefing by people with too much time on their hands? I guess that's the old school MMO feel though. Time should be a metric which is rewarded, especially with how hyped the game is, whilst it's still a few years away from launch. And I've heard plenty of stories from EVE Online, and yeah, I guess that kind of gameplay has a certain type of appeal for a certain type of person. I'm just not sure how large it can ever be. As far as Classic goes, factions aren't going anywhere. I predicted in the past for TBC, Alliance will see a huge surge on PvE servers, which has already begun, and the Horde will take over PvP servers, which is also in the process of happening. Why? Because faction imbalances between the two different server types have just led the floodgates to be open, especially when there's no restrictions on character transfers. On retail, I could see faction restrictions going for PvE content at some point, but them still keeping factions about in the lore of the game. I will be amazed if they ever fully dissolve the Horde versus Alliance in an expansion release or an official cutscene. It's just such a core part of the game at this point. After all, it's going to be harder to sell merch if we're all buddies, right? How can they do that thing at BlizzCon where they yell, "Who is here representing the Horde and or Alliance?" Factions cause so many problems for both versions of the game, but I don't see them going anywhere anytime soon. Now, let's roll out 9.1, where we all have our common enemy, see all our different faction leaders chilling next to each other in Oribos, give us TBC, where we all fight the Legion together, and have Arena, where factions don't even matter. And I guess we'll all just keep on keeping on pretending they still mean something. Anyways, guys, so let me know what you think. In terms of Classic, I don't really think there's much to be said, but what are they going to do about factions in retail? Do they have an expiry date, or are we just going to keep on pretending? As always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.